Hello colorists, and welcome back to my channel. Today's coloring page is from Mythomorphia, and I'm very excited because we are going to be using some reference photos of real foxes in order to help us with color and tone and placement. So let's get started. So I found some really great fox photos, and I like using Pinterest because I can easily save them to either a Pinterest board that I've set up, or I can even download a few onto my phone to keep them close by. And I'm really drawn to kind of the orangey red foxes. So I'm going to stick to that very traditional color palette. And I've pulled a few oranges, some deep reds, some browns, probably more than I'll end up using, but it's better to have a range of options just to pull from as you go. Now, starting with our fox paws, you can see that he has some very light colored toes and then kind of a dark grayish brown, almost black socks that kind of go up to that knee joint. So we'll start there. Now, first 10% French gray on his toes. And now this is almost white, so I'm not really adding any color. I'm not using it to add any color. It's just going to help us to blend with the darker colors that are going to be going up his legs, which will be 90% French gray. And I'm using very light pressure here. Then I'll go over it just a bit with espresso, which is a very dark brown. And I'm just sort of peppering this color over a few areas just to give it a little bit of variation. Then to finish it up, I'm using straight black, especially that edge that would be kind of the bottom of his paws. Now, the next part of our fox that I notice is how dark the tips of his ears and underneath his jaw are. And we'll use the same dark colors as before, starting with 90% French gray. Now, remember to use light pressure here so that you can layer even in these tiny little areas. And then I'll follow it up with a little bit of black. Now, underneath his chin, it isn't quite as dark, so I'm going to use 70% French gray. Again, very, very light pressure so that it gives that same soft effect as we saw in the reference photos. Then I'll just kind of blend it out a little bit with 20% French gray, just because if you leave the dark color right up against the white, it just creates a little bit more of a harsh transition, and this sort of helps to blend that out towards the white. Switching back to that 70%, I'll add in just a bit more color around some areas here on his face. Something quite striking about the fox is that lovely dark liner all around his eyes, so I'll add that in with my black pencil. And I'll add in that dark iris as well. Let's go back to our reference photos. Each of these foxes has a lovely sort of golden tone to his fur, and so I'd like to make sure that I add that in, and I think Crayola's Harvest Gold is perfect. I'll just put this down in some kind of random spots, just really nice and light, and hopefully this will give me that sort of golden undertone that I'm looking for. And we're just going to keep layering additional colors. So next we'll take Mineral Orange, one of my favorite Prismacolors. And in fact, I'm actually going to need to replace this one soon. It's getting very, very short on me. And with this, I'll just fill in some more of these white gaps. Again, light to medium pressure, since we're going to be going in and layering in a few more colors over top of this. Then the same with Burnt Ochre, which has a lovely sort of orange tone to this brown. Now, as we go through this, I have to be honest, I've never been very good at realism. My style is a bit more illustrative, but I do want to push myself and challenge myself to move more in that direction once in a while, just for some practice, especially when our subject matter is drawn in a bit more of a realistic style. So when I attempt a lot of these pages for you guys, I'm really just experimenting. I don't know how it's going to turn out any more than you do. So if you've got some things that are kind of outside of your comfort zone, it's always good to push yourself a little bit Not because what you're doing now isn't good, it isn't that at all. It's just that trying different things sort of stretches your skill set, and you really learn a lot about yourself and your style in the process. Now we'll kick it up a notch and start to add in some of those deeper colors that we saw in our inspiration photos, namely pumpkin orange, another of my favorites, which is really funny because I can't stand orange anywhere else except for my coloring. In my coloring, these oranges are some of my go to, very, very favorite colors to use. I guess maybe it's because they're a bit more kind of on the earthy side, which I'm particularly drawn to. They aren't your kind of typical neon oranges. And back to mineral orange, just to add in some more of this medium tone and just some places that I think still kind of need it. Okay, so if you look back at our fox inspiration photos, remember they have quite a bit of dark between their fur layers. So I'm going to try to replicate that somewhat with my 90% French gray. See if we can't hide this in some of those fur layers back here. Our foxes also had a hint of some red tones, so I'll use terracotta to try to replicate that. And I wish I could articulate why I'm placing this down where I am. It's really just kind of a combination of where it looks like there's more red in the photos that we referenced, and the other part is just kind of where I think it needs it. And of course, to help sell the realism, we need to add in some shadows. And I'll use dark umber for this step. Now, I wish I could see the fox's underbelly in some of these photos. I couldn't really find anything that told me, like, definitively whether or not that underbelly was white. So I just decided that it wasn't, and I didn't stress about it. And now we'll use the Prismacolor colorless blender to blend these all out. And I'm just going to be very gentle with this, nice circular strokes, especially in the areas against where I just left that kind of white coloring page blank. That light pressure will just sort of help us soften that transition. Ooh, I really like how these dark paws are blending out towards the orange. That looks really nice. I also love how the blender makes our colors more vibrant. This palette is really starting to look like our reference photos. And speaking of those photos, I'm not really seeing that really kind of red orange tone in my own coloring. So I think I'll take just a little bit of a bolder red and try to add that in just some certain places. All right, our fox's body is complete for the moment. Let's turn our attention to the tail, or should I say tails, because our fox has quite a few of them, which I think makes for a beautiful composition on our page here. And the first thing that I noticed from our reference photos is that the tip of the fox's tail is white. So I'm going to start with kind of a 10% French gray, just kind of in that little bit of area between where I want that tip to be white and then where I'm going to be placing down the oranges. I'm just going to add this in because it'll be a little bit easier to blend it out later. And with those oranges, I'm just going to place them down, paying attention to the direction that I'm moving my pencil in. So I'm going to be trying to match the direction and the curvature of the tail, which I'm hoping will kind of mimic the look of our little fox fur hairs. So don't go side to side, just kind of up and down, kind of matching that long shape of his tail. Oh, you know what? I didn't even notice these little cloud curly cues kind of coming off of these foxtails. These are really pretty cool. We'll have to use these to our advantage somehow. And now I'm just going to finish up using all the colors that we previously used on his body and still utilizing that kind of directional approach, and we'll see what happens. All right, I'm kind of finding that these long strokes, they're okay, but fox fur is fairly short. So let's see what happens when I try to shorten these strokes up a little bit. To fill in all the white space that's still kind of peeking through here, I'm going to go back and use my Crayola Harvest Gold to fill in those gaps. Add in a bit of dark umber to kind of darken up some of these areas. Add some shading. Then I'll blend it out with our colorless blender. Again, trying to keep our pencil moving in either circular strokes or in that same direction as our previous colored pencil marks. Again, matching that curvature of the tail itself so that we're pushing and pulling our colors in the right direction. Now, if we circle back to these kind of cloudy, curly-Q things, I'm going to jazz them up a little bit with our white Posca pen. Just some lines and dots, just my standard Morse code approach in whatever configuration makes you happy. And here are our foxtails, all done. And I really do like the way that they came out. And just a funny little side bit, I used almost an entire colorless blender on just these tails. I went from a brand new one, almost, just sharpened it out of the box, to probably like 1.5 inches long. So I used up almost an entire blender on this thing. Now, my only regret on these tails is that I just feel that they're a little bit too similar to one another. They kind of feel like a carbon copy. I sort of figured that out kind of while I was doing this top tail, which I really kind of like. But of course, it was one of the last ones that I did. And so it was a little bit too late to course correct. But oh well, lesson learned. I do have a tendency to kind of fall into that trap where if there's a whole lot of the exact same thing to color that I'm coloring in exactly the same way, you get a little bit lost in that tedium and you kind of forget to mix it up a little bit. So that section there, that kind of upper tail area where I just kind of left a little bit more of that kind of golden or, light section. And then this section down here, which I colored first, these are my favorites. So kind of the first one that I did and then almost the last one that I did. This one down here just looks kind of the most bushy to me. And I think it's because I was a bit more sparing with that dark brown. Where I used it, it just kind of helps to sell that shape a bit better than where I used it before. Here I kind of used it to kind of sell that shape of the tail rather than just adding in dark lines to kind of mimic the fur. So definitely a good kind of lesson learned. But like I said, I really do enjoy the way that this page came out. I had a lot of fun doing it. I had a lot of fun kind of stretching myself. Now, I like looking up reference photos. And pushing myself a little bit outside of my comfort zone. And I encourage you guys to do the same. That is it for me today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button. It really, really does help to support this channel. And subscribe if you haven't already. Now, I have a whole library of coloring tutorials on my channel, so go check those out. And I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.